Good morning. Once again, the Psyops are increasing rapidly. I was watching Tucker and Professor Jang, who's not a professor, by the way. If you look at his resume, his CV, it's quite interesting. So he got the master's, he got the bachelor's. He's born in China, raised in Canada. His parents are still living in Canada. It's kind of like the opposite of me. Born an American, raised in Asia. And I came back to the States, and he came back to China. Then he got arrested for working for CNN. Now, I think that's when they turned him. Because he's got 2.11 million subscribers. 2.11 million subscribers on his YouTube channel. It's only been there for a year. How does that happen? The way that happens is you have a lot of money backing you. As I told you, the Sean Ryans, the Joe Rogans, the Tucker Carlsons. All these guys are chosen. And they're chosen because they are the propaganda measures of the agendas. And I say agendas, different agendas. There are the Zionists who are trying to destroy the United States. There are the CCP who are trying to destroy the United States. There is Russia, who's trying to make sure that we are impotent in most of the world. And and when I say the Zionists, I'm going to talk about it further because I've talked about it with Plan Andenia. How that's just a continuation of the full plan decided by the Rothschilds and their propagandist, Theodore Herzl, who put it into a package. Remember, there's always been people who believe that the Jewish people should go back to the Holy Land. But it's the Zionists who have taken it into a political framework, which now they're talking about the whole idea that there's just total chaos that's happening. And even if the Israelis take over in the region, which they aren't, because most of the people in Tel Aviv are running for their lives, leaving the country, and I bet you $100 they are headed straight to Patagonia, especially the ones who know what the plan is. Why would they want to take out the U.S.? Well, once they've screwed everything up, they've already screwed Europe. Europe is dust. They did that by the replacement migration program that they documented. If you watch my prior episodes, I had the links there documented. I'll put another link for you if you're that lazy, you don't want to go back and watch that one. But I showed you how the UN has a document titled Replacement Migration. And it is specifically designed to, quote, help these nations, but in reality it's to dilute these nations. But what it's really going to do is you now have opposing sides in a landmass. This is the thing about territory. This is very primitive. It's the idea of territory. If you have Africans living in Africa and you have Europeans living in Europe, you don't have as much conflict except when you have certain factions who want to go to an area to exploit their wealth and resources. That's why Europe went down to Africa. That's why Europe went to Asia and exploited and enslaved the Asians and the Southeast Asians and the Middle East. And when British colonists tried to make a break, they re-enslaved us through debt banking, through credit. That's what we're under enslavement right now. That's why that whole thing about you will own nothing and be happy. Well, guess what? A lot of you have not been owning anything, especially if you bought it with credit. Remember, they've been pushing you and pushing you and pushing you to buy with credit? Well, that's having more and more ramifications. Tell you a story about my great uncle. He had apartments all over Chicago. He was a contractor, carpenter, old family, Germans, German Swiss. Very typical story. Germans and German Swiss who went to Chicago right after the Great Fire and rebuilt Chicago and made it bigger and better. Well, my great uncle lost his shirt. Kind of like what's going to be happening. It's happening right now. It happened in 2008. People have invested in all this real estate. That's why I've been telling people, if you've got the cash and you can hold on to it, if you've got assets that you can trade for whatever the value is at that time, because of the devaluation of the dollar and how prices are just going to drop. Prices have to drop. Prices have to drop, and just in the same way that you had a reset in the 1930s. The question is whether you can hold out. A lot of people can't because they're so indebted. This is how they've enslaved. This is how the central banks and the globalist banks have enslaved. The nations are tied under. You don't need the IMF in order to do it. All you got to do is control the central bank like they control our Federal Reserve. This is what we've lost presidents over. This is where we've had assassination attempts against presidents who actually were trying to defend the country before they finally got to a point where now our leadership is totally owned. Like that billionaire kid, spill the beans, talking about every president, every politician is totally owned by these billionaires. And this is the wild part about these billionaires. At least the billionaires, like I said before, had the common sense not to kill the golden goose. But now, since they have no loyalty to whatever country they may have come from or habitate in, they are, quote, globalists. Was it nomad capitalists, they like to call themselves? Well, that's going to be an ugly, ugly awakening when they realize that nationalism, just because of how nationalism responds to globalism, remember, everything happens in a pendulum. Swings back, swings forth. So all these people have been following what the globalist guy, the nomad capitalist on his channel has been talking about. I think he's a full-on shyster. He's trying to get money out of people. Even the places he's telling you to go and run to, he's out of his mind. What it really means is he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he's talking about because he doesn't have enough life experience. We'll be talking about the nerds, the geeks, who never grew up. See, everybody's a nerd. Everybody's someone who was got picked on when they were younger. A lot of guys became Navy SEALs because of that. A lot of guys became Green Berets because of that. Then there are other people who became Green Berets and Navy SEALs because they wanted to challenge themselves. And then the ones that I respect the most is because they wanted to defend their country. Even if their patriotism is used against them by these globalist bankers. That's what makes me really sick. Those are the ones I really relate to. That's the reason I did the things. I did it out of patriotism. It wasn't because I wanted to prove myself. I'd already been in prison in Vietnam. I survived something that a lot of people cannot survive mentally and psychologically. That I actually turned it into something that actually turned me into the confident and focused person that I am, which is what I'm trying to share with you, and how you're going to have to go through traumatic events. A lot of you have gone through those traumatic events. The question is, how do you use them? Are you still the victim? Or did you realize this was just an experience that I went through? I will now use this as a benefit to my psyche in order how to go into the rest of the world. I got a comment by somebody who says, you know what? The reason you're it's not that you're being censored or anything. It's because people just can't deal with the idea of what you're saying, which is they don't have the wherewithal in order to confront the fact that these people are trying to kill 80% of the world's population. I mean, think about that. You are the progeny of a genetic line that goes back thousands of years. Would you be here right now if one of your ancestors had the same thinking of I don't know what I'm going to do, so I'm going to surrender? Think about that. You're going to be the one who ends your family line that goes back thousands of years. It's easier for some people because maybe they don't even know who their father was or who their grandfather was, or they don't know where they came from, or what the challenges were for their ancestors to survive from where they were living, or to come to the United States, or come to whatever country they may have arrived at. That's why I'm always pushing family history. Because if you know your family history, you're going to die with your boots on if you die. But you have a better chance of getting through things if you buckle down, you don't act like a pussy, and you don't frickin' become a victim. I mean, that's very disheartening. But I understand, and I said this in the very beginning when I really started cranking down. A lot of people are not going to take this channel. You can't. Because you feel so weak. And if you do, why are you there? Why are you where you are? You've been set up. This is where the soft time, the great times have created soft men and soft women. And why prior generations who had that hard times and created the great times for us. And those of us who didn't respect it and became weak. And this is the wild thing about it. Why we're in the trouble we're in is because it's not just with, quote, the dominion, with the minions. It's also with the oligarchs and these billionaires. Because they're soft men and soft women too. With really stupid ideas. At least they're the people who they benefited from the wealth. Because we're talking like, the Donald Trump Jr.'s. And even Donald Trump. And even Fred Trump and his father. But at least Fred Trump's father was the one, even though he was a draft dodger when he left Germany, he tried to make something because he was under the idea of going through hard times. This is the thing. This is your call up. This is when you're called up. This is the understanding whether you do it for yourself, or your family, or your country. And this is how you get wiped out. The weak will get wiped out and thinned out by the hard times. That's a fact of nature. That's the genetics. This is the Darwin challenge. Do you get cunning? Do you think smart? Do you move forward? Do you fight? Do you have a picture of why you're fighting? My reason is I don't want to be the last one in my family line direct. My ancestors have gone through a lot to provide what I have. That's out of respect to that. Also, the idea that so many people in my life have tried to kill me in my past and have taken those who were very close to me. I've lost someone at the time was the most important person to me at the time. And it's still hard for me to talk about it. Yes, civilians get killed in war. The innocent get killed in war. And you do your best to protect the innocent. But there's a point when you can't. And it's up to them to stand up. And this is the reason that G. Edward Griffin was talking about his concern, his fear that we have totally, and we have almost totally gone over to a collectivism where we're relying on everybody else to take care of us. Instead of that individualism that is what made America great in its younger days. It's made every republic strong in its younger days. We are now in the devolution already of what was a republic and then became an empire in the same way of Rome. That's what happened. Man, my turkeys are just going off today because it's such a beautiful day outside. And the question is, where do you stand? Are you just going to bend over and take it? Lay back and just frickin' say, okay, have at with me in the Matrix. Because you were in the Matrix. We are in the Matrix. We're not going in the Matrix. We're not being forced in the Matrix. all these other stuffs that are coming in with Palantir, these psychotics. I mean, Palantir, God almighty. 2 psychotics, sociopaths, actually. Damn. Sociopaths with money. That's the ills of the world. Sociopaths with money. That's what keeps me up at night. What are they freaking cranking out in their freaking soft-headed minds? Soft people created by good times. Remember, these are kids who just got all this untold wealth. And yet, it suddenly imbues them with this wisdom and intelligence. And people will come to them because it's like a title. Oh, you are such a great professor. Why do you think Professor John goes by Professor John when it should just be John? That's it. Yeah. The guy with predictive history. 2.11. Those are bots. And you can tell because when you go through, it's just like, hey, love it. Oh, that's great. Oh, God, this was a great episode. Oh, yeah. More of it. That's what I like when I see interaction. Even stuff that I might not agree with. I will respond. Unless you're just being rude. Then if I could just delete it, by the way. So just so you know. If you're just being rude and you're just trying to like make it look like your dick's bigger than mine, I don't care. But you're just showing yourself to be an idiot. And I'll just get rid of it because there's no discourse. This is what's important. We're having a discourse right here. We're communicating. When I start doing interviews again and I start doing work from my office where I have to put up images to show you stuff so it actually more effectively, and it's not just a coffee talk where we can talk about stuff. This is a discourse. We're talking about things, hopefully getting you to ask questions. I'm getting you there to ask questions. And if you're answering some of these questions in the comments, fantastic. I respond to that. And then I'll put something extra in there if I know more about it. So as I said, that's what this whole thing is about today, is the Psyop is getting bigger. And the Psyop is hitting you from all these sides. The key is to remain calm. The key is to keep your life going. Be focused on things that will benefit you in the long run. The people who are going to make it through this are the people who have focus. I'll give you a perfect example. One of the things that kept me alive in prison. Ladies in your 40s, a quick way to fuck. You got to watch out with these things. They start listening to you. I've had conversations where my voice just goes up, and suddenly Siri is asking me, where do I want to go? Like it's getting directions for me, or it's asking me to, and it's just because I raised my voice. That's how screwed up these things are. And it's also part of you questioning your reality. It's just like with that kid. I'm putting the link over to the X episode. I've got it saved. That kid, billionaire kid who talks about how all the politicians are actors. We knew this. Hopefully you knew this. I've known it for a long time. Trump, Hegseth, every one of them is an actor that has been placed. They're the guys who are supposed to take the brunt. Just in the same way that the Jews have been placed. They're chosen all right, but I don't think they really understand what they've been chosen for. They were chosen for the same thing in Germany. Yeah. When you really understand what happened in Germany, why did Hitler have to get rid of them? Because he couldn't afford to feed them. And he was asking for Switzerland and Basel, where the money comes from, and the control of the money, to give him money to ship them out. And they said no. Why did they say no? They were sacrificing them. They sacrificed the Jews. If you know the hierarchy inside the Ashkenazi Jewish system, there's a caste system. And actually it's interesting because it's like the blue eyes and the blondes. It's almost like an Aryan race kind of thing. How did that appear? Zionists and Nazis. Zionists and Nazis. Very similar philosophies. Eugenics, purity of race, purity of this, purity of that. Yeah. And you need an example. Why? because they needed to get more Jews to go to Israel. How do you get more Jews to go to Israel? You kill a bunch so that the ones who are left over say, Europe sucks and we got to get out of here. And they went. And now where are they running to? They're running to Patagonia. And it was all set up. It's a game. It's a total game. And they'll burn one country over another country just to keep people's fears going on and to create anger and animosity. This is how this game is played. If you have read pawns in the game, you know how it's played. That's the whole best idea. That's why, even though I am informing you with facts, I am at the same time that are very depressing. I am at the same time giving you the tools with which to get over this. If you know your number's up, and everybody's number's up, right? Remember the old saying, the old joke, nobody's getting out of here alive? Nobody is getting out of here alive. The whole idea is to have a good life, an enjoyable life that you enjoy, and it's longer than shorter. That's it. What do you got down here? So one of the ways of extending your life is to make sure you're aware of the facts. There is a genocide occurring. It's not the one in Gaza. It's not the one in Iran or Israel. It's the whole world. That's why they blew up the Georgia Guidestones. They gave you warning, and then they removed the message. So the rest of the people ignore it or think it's just bullshit, or they think it's just it's a conspiracy theory. Well, as we've been learning, the conspiracy theories have turned out to be real conspiracies. What is a conspiracy? A conspiracy is two or more people conspiring together towards a plan. And there's actually not even a good or bad to conspire. You're just getting together and creating something. It's when you start creating secret societies, and then the secret societies get hijacked. And this is how the Rothschilds play. Remember, they always get onto something that's working. They never initiate anything. It's like OPM. Use other people's money. OPM, other people's money. Other people, OPE, other people's energy. They see where an energy is going, and if they find out it's successful, they jump on it. You get some people who are coming up with the ideas of socialism and Marxism and Zionism, and you jump on it. And then you use those people towards your ends, because what is the end goal? The end goal is a new world order that is totally controlled by a very small group of people. And that small group of people is at the head, right now, is the Illuminati and the Rothschilds. And the Rothschilds were the ones who created that. They created it back in the late 1700s. And we know that by a book that I'm reading, which is wild. I've told you about it before. It's actually written in the same text as the U.S. Constitution, where your S's are actually F's without a cross in it. That's how old the document is. That's how old they've been going at this in this iteration. But when it comes down to it, it's the whole idea of the prophecy, which is the majority of the world's population will be Jewish and true good Jews, right? So if you're a bad Jew, you're not included. You're actually just as bad as the Goyim in your lot in life. So they are going towards this end, and they're making it happen because they have the wealth, and they have the conniving, and they have the enthusiasm of the people. This is the thing. When you're fighting wars, like the Chinese are fighting against us right now, they're not doing an all-out war. They wrote a whole document about it. 2 colonels wrote a document about it. It's a true unconventional warfare. And Professor Zhang is just another example of it, which is to demoralize the people. It's the same thing that the Rothschilds and the Zionists are doing to Americans. Because when you realize that they totally own our government, the Zionists, and the managers are the Israelis, have control over the United States, and the American people have, up until this point, even those who were in the MAGA cult, until they realized they were in the MEGA cult, were so enthusiastic because they were trying to bring it back. But they're trying to bring it back in a way that it can never be brought back. The only way that this is going to be fixed is through violence. It's kind of like when you have the bully, and the bully just keeps on pushing you and hitting you and destroying you and demoralizing you, trying to make you this total subordinate, which then aka is a slave. You do whatever they tell you to do. You pay your federal taxes. And the whole idea of what our market is based on, which is fiat currency. They've always been pushing toward the excuse of, oh, well, we created the wars. It's just like the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was never supposed to be won. And that's the reason that, like, Tucker was talking about, like, well, you know, back in the day, Walter Cronkite, like, he was separate. No, Walter Cronkite and Tucker Carlson are the same thing. They're owned. Walter Cronkite was owned, and he was implemented in 68 at the Tet Offensive. We know this based on the responses from various leadership in Vietnam, that if the press did not report it in the manner that Walter Cronkite did, which is basically saying we're losing the war in Vietnam, that they would have been at the peace talks in Paris and would have given us anything that we wanted. Kind of like what we had with Iran. More and more, when you get the actual reporting from people who were like in Iran just before the bombing started, we are put into this war in Iran, specifically to destroy the United States. This is the next step of destruction, while at the same time picking the bones of the elephant as it lays on the ground. That's what this is all about. And again, the reason they have to destroy us is because all the rest of the world is going to be on fire. And their safety zone is going to be in Patagonia. And they can't have us in the United States who've really woken up, going down there and hunting them down and holding them responsible for everything they've been doing for 3,000 years. That this is the end result. And the biggest coup that they had was to create the Judeo-Christian. That is one of the biggest. Talk about a propaganda scheme that works so thoroughly that you have people like Mike Huckabee and Pete Hegseth. They're the useful idiots of these people that are looking forward to an apocalypse because they're bringing back the Messiah, or the Messiah, not realizing that the first one's coming is going to be the Antichrist because of what they are doing. If there's going to be one coming, it's going to be the Antichrist. And both of them are saying, the Jews are saying it's going to be their Messiah, but the Christians are saying it's going to be the Antichrist, and then it's going to be the Messiah. Good luck. This is all a plan. This is the Schofield Bible. It's that Brit before who was convinced, by the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds are an atheist Jewish dynasty, right? You even heard that when Evelyn was talking, well, my family really has not been following, but I have. That when a guy is talking like that, what he's really saying is that I'm just trying to placate you to make it look like it's okay. But that the real reason we created, and thank you for the award from Israel for having sponsored and gotten the money for you guys to create Israel. But the real reason we put you there is so that we have our own agents and assets there to create mayhem and chaos throughout the region. While we can do business and profit from all that, whether in arms or the collection of oil and slavery, etc., etc., etc. Just like it's been done around the world. That's how these people, these. If you come from a society that believes that everybody who's not of your clan is supposed to be treated as cattle, what do you think that creates in the mentality of these people? They think of you as cattle and slaves, and they will react and interact with you in that manner. And the best slave is the one who wants to be the slave, right? It's varying degrees. Have you ever questioned the idea, considering the population of slaves on a plantation in the South, which we find out later, it's actually, the Jews were actually the biggest owners of slaves. And most especially, they were the ones who ran the markets, the slave markets. That's why on Sabbath they were closed, right? But you ever thought, why is it? I mean, the number of people on a plantation who are slaves in contrast to the slave owners and the masters. Boom! 1 hour and all the masters would be dead. Why didn't that happen? Because they were conditioned. And guess what? You don't have to be black to be a slave. That's what they've done to every country in the West. And in the majority of other countries. That's why Americans are letting this happen. That's why Americans voluntarily pay federal income taxes, not knowing it's a voluntary act. Because they don't want to be bothered with trying to find out whether they can actually save like 80% of your income, because the other stuff you're paying to your state taxes, at least your state taxes, like I said before, are going to your local area, state and county. But what was the how? If we have, and they say all these taxes are going to whatever they're supposed to be paying for, and remember, this is all in federal notes, which is really, you're not paying to the government, you're paying to the Federal Reserve. That's why your fiat currency doesn't say US dollar bill tender. It says Federal Reserve note. And your taxes are paid to the Federal Reserve note. It's a separate entity. It has nothing to do with America. As a matter of fact, you're paying all these foreigners who are raping these bankers, these foreign bankers who are raping this country like every country that they've done before. Was it Catherine Austin Fitts? What did she say? Says, yeah, plundering all these other countries, and now all the plundering comes home. So now the plundering is being done on the United States. As I said, cleaning the bones off the elephant. So recognize what the Psyop is. If they have a subscriber number, I'd say it's about, let's give them some leeway, 80,000. If they're above 80,000, if they're definitely above 100,000, they're coming on the radar of being chosen at about 100 to 250,000. After that, they're chosen, and they will be ramping up very quickly. You'll start to see it going up. When they're in the 2 million, and especially if they've only been around for a year, and they're in China, it's a great question. How? As someone who was residing in China, who was taken prisoner and was turned to become an asset when he was in prison, in my view, how is it that he's able to run a channel and to teach in a country that has forbidden YouTube? You're not allowed to interact with YouTube in China. What portal? What VPN has he set up? And if that's the case, why are they not? Boom. Right at his house. And this is the thing to remember about with the Chinese. This is the reason, unless they have total separation from their family line, like you're a Chinese American, which why call you a Chinese American? You're an American who has Chinese origins. And they came during the creation of the railroad in the 1800s to help work on the railroad, work in San Francisco. and you have no connection, you are an American, as American can be, red, white, and blue. It's the Chinese who have come over and they still have ties. If they are publicly open, they're of concern. Especially if they're making it look like they're separate. Again, this is what I had said before. Beware your gurus. Beware your advisors. Beware of all the people based on their backgrounds. Tucker Carlson, his ties to the CIA, his ties to the Pilgrim, what is that group in it's the Pilgrim. He's attended dinners. That's how he has ties. Just like with the Masons. My dad was a Mason. I know this stuff through him. It's interesting. He never pushed for me to get in. I find that very interesting. I wonder if Tucker, I know he was brought. I was brought. I just joined the Caledonian Club because I'm Scottish. And I had to prove my ancestry to get into that. Which is wild. It wasn't through the Graham line because I guess we were border Scots who were kicked out under William of Orange to settle Northern Ireland at that time, not later. And I was actually having to bring it through a Robinson who married, and that through the family book in Kentucky. Yeah. We're in a situation where these psyops are ramping up, and what they're also trying to do is they're trying to distract you. They're filling you with information. Information is distracting. That's why I have to watch it when I'm giving you information. Because if I give you too much information, it's an overload. You don't know how to react to it. And more importantly, it puts you into a zone state. And then you don't get the other things done that you need to be getting onto. Remember I told you, I'm not worried about anything because I've done all the things I've done up until now. And there's other stuff that I need to get done too. There's stuff I have to work on my land. Stuff I have to get done on the boat. You know, we use boats because that's how we get food collection. It's important to have a boat. Kind of like the boat does the work in the same way that a farmer would use a horse to draft. And we will be using those again for people who know how to do that. Knowledge is king. The more knowledge that you have about various things, this is the other thing I'm imploring to do. We have become a society of specialists. That's been the problem. That's why we have these people who have all these billions who think that they're so intelligent, but they're only specialists. That's what I was talking about. A lot of rich people are very stupid. Why? Because they put all their energy into making money. But then you ask them about something about this or something about that, and they can't go out. Even Ford knew a lot about various things and wasn't so focused. He ended up making the money after he came up with the ideas. Those kind of ideas of practicality of an actual product, that's what's been lost in this country. That's why we've become a society of service providers. Who was the last country? The last empire as it was falling? The UK. That's why banking and interactivity of services, the Brits had it. And now the Americans have filled in that slot. And what do we see in the UK right now? We see people trying to regain what they had lost by not being producers through private small industry, but it's being crippled by the big machine. They don't want them to come back. And then they also brought in a bunch of invaders so that they have an actual enemy to fight on their own soil. Think about that. They brought in an enemy populace that is strengthened. Oh, was it Germany? Was it Germany that says they are now drafting people, getting ready to draft people and to service, but they're not going to do it with foreigners because they can't trust the foreigners. Think about that. So you're going to have your own citizenry sent off to go fight in another war outside while all these invaders are now interacting with your women. Think about that. This is all part of this plan of destruction. It's not the idea of like, oh, we're going to do a regime change. The regime change has already occurred in Iran. And the worst part about it is, these are even more radicalized. And they've learned the lesson of Korea, which is if you aren't running nukes, You will get screwed. You will get attacked. We're not messing with North Korea because they've got nukes. This game is getting very heated. It's getting very amplified because they know they've got a short time left before people just totally wake up. And that's when you'll have the French Revolution type. It's not going to be an American Revolution kind of type because we have no sides anymore. They've done that by diluting the idea of what it means to be an American. This is not the same identity of what it meant to be an American during the creation of this country. Even up until the Civil War, or the War of Secession, which was instigated, again, by the Rothschilds. They got their fingers into everything. The way they get around it is they don't send a Rothschild, they'll send a relative. That's why you got a Belmont who comes. That's why you have a Warburg. That's why in World War I you have Warburgs in Germany and you have a Warburg in New York. And they're banking, providing the money to get people shooting each other. That's what that's all about. Use the money to thin out the population. The more you can drop the rest of us, then their number seems to be bigger, even though it's still not getting that much bigger. There's an active plan. Jan's talked about it. I'm trying to get you further into it to understand how it's actually being applied instead of just, oh, well, they're taking food from people and all this kind of stuff. If they get their withers, if they can actually get to the point of a full-on nuclear war, like I say, between 5 and 10 nukes, to lift up that earth, that's it. Because where does about 80% of the population live? It lives between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. You wipe out that belt, you achieve what all these rabbis have been talking about, which is the promised chosen people are in power, and the goyim are their slaves or cattle, because there ain't any food. As we know from the Epstein files, they're into beef jerky. Yeah, they have their own host. So, what can you do about this? And it goes back to the other question of I just got to throw my hands up. You can't throw your hands up. If you throw your hands up, then they win. I had someone very close to me ask me, why? When I told him, it's just like one point, anybody who's been and has been in combat and has survivor's remorse has had the thoughts of offing themselves. Anybody who's been in combat and has close connections and you lost, there's a part, it's so hard to go to the other side and join your compadres, right? And I was asked why I didn't. And it's because I would not do to myself what all these other people have been trying to do to me for 5 years. Think about that. And that's actually the reason I am still here. It's the reason that I am still fighting. I will continue to fight. It's also because in the culture of the Scots-Irish are the fighters. We fight. We know battle. We know when we're being attacked. A lot of people don't know when they're being attacked. You're being attacked. You're being attacked through your monetary system. You're being attacked through your political system. You're being attacked through your own religion. How can you do it? You need to understand your connection to God personally, directly. That's where strength comes from. Understand that religion is actually just a practice. That's why it's called a religious practice. The whole idea of a religion is that it's supposed to get you to God. And if you're fortified in God, then you have no fear. And you're truly clear. And you also know when your religious leaders and your political leaders and your monetary, financial, economic leaders are lying to you, where they can use patriotism or the fear of you're going to lose your money when it's not even money at all. It's actually debt. Real money, gold and silver, and debt is fiat currency. That's why they put us on it. That's why they're always trying to remove gold. It's the original money. And the original money, you can't mess with it. Except when you've got bankers fiddling with the price of it in relation to the fake money, which isn't even any money. When you go and get something and you put a debt, it's a number on a register in the bank system. So when they start see what they're doing in the digital banking, they're actually bringing it to its truest form, which is to show you it's nothing. It's nothing. If all the computers suddenly disappeared, you would have no money and you would have no debt. Think about that. Until people go back onto trading and barter system, a pie for an hour of work. Then it says, well, God, I can't keep on doing the pies because then I have to go and get the berries and I have to buy the flour from this person. But what am I buying the flour with? How am I? Oh, I'm trading the berries for the flour. And then they move from the barter system to the representational system, which is money. Which is how it started, which is like in Asia with copper coins. But copper coins are too heavy. What's lighter than copper? Silver. A lot lighter than gold. But gold is because of its scarcity. And that's why they keep on trying to make gold. Even to this day, they're trying to make gold, but it's not economically feasible to do it. They've done it. Turning lead into gold, etc. It's done. It's been done. It's been done for years. Not economically feasible. Because the intent is, what is the use of the money? Gold and silver, and actually when it comes down to it, it's land. And land that you can control. Can you protect your land? Can you say that you own that land? That's one of the things. Why did the Native American, the American Indians, all the tribes in the Americas, why are they not still in control? Because they don't control the land. I mean, there are sad facts in the world. So you can either cry about it and be a victim, say that I can't respond to this, or you can get some chutzpah. You can get some freaking Apache attitude or Scots-Irish attitude, and whatever culture it is that you have a fighting instinct in, and you stop letting them take things from you because it's stealing. This is theft. It's a theft of even your registering at birth. It's wild. If you get a chance, read a book called A Paled Horse by William Cooper. Bill Cooper. Did they assassinate him? Flat out. And how did they do it? Go read up on it. He was a dangerous man. And George Carlin probably would have been assassinated much earlier. But they just let him float until he died because he's a comedian. Because people don't take comedians too seriously. But if you look at what comedians do and why comedians do what they do, it's because you can get away with it. Comedians get away with the same thing that fiction writers get away with. Because if you're reading a fiction book, oh, well, it's just fiction. But remember, it's just like propaganda. And that's how they use John. They use John because 80% of what he's saying is accurate. And that's the part that freaks people out like Tucker. But see, Tucker, remember I was telling you, you can look at the two of them. I look at the two of them and I see the results of soft times. I mean, good times make soft men. They're the perfect examples. He's got a silver spoon since the day he was born. And he's got the excuse when he was younger of his mother running off. Well, he says, oh, I got over it. And I go, well, really? You still haven't freaking like manned up to the situation of like being a little bit more critical about the situations in the world and actually the people that you have on your show and have a qualifier and say, or ask questions like, if I had had him on my show, I would have said, I'm having it hard to understand why you're so successful with the numbers and your bots have a commonality about them, or your comments have a commonality about them. And you're from China, you live in China, you're not in Canada anymore. You also have had an issue, even Tom Bilyeu had him and actually said you were raised in Canada and had problems over there. And you're now in China. And how could you stay in China and have a YouTube channel? And how did he get out of prison? Because most of the people who get accused of what he was accused of don't get out of prison unless they make a deal. It's just like the guys that we used to capture in El Salvador. Those guys were either going to be executed or they're going to stay in prison for a long time. And suddenly they were out. Guess what? Because they were half of our teams. They were very effective going in after the guerrillas under pseudo operations. You are in the process of learning how to swim in the reality of the world right now. How do you swim with the reality of understanding that all your political leaders are actors? And that they're owned not just by the billionaires, the wealthy people of the world, but the wealthy elite. Because there are a lot of wealthy people that are going to die just like everybody else because they didn't think right and they didn't get the right place or they didn't get set up properly. So money really doesn't matter. That's why when people tell me, well, I don't have enough money to do this, I'm going, if you have enough money to get somewhere and to begin a life, you will get through this. Where's Whitney Webb? I have questions about Whitney Webb. She's got kids. Who is her patron? Who is her patron? Why is her patron? When I say patron, I mean the patron. Kind of like Tucker's patron, like Joe Rogan's patrons. He's in with Zuckerberg, right? He's in with all these people. He's a member of boards with these people. You don't become a member unless you're in the club. You get invited into the club, and then you increase. It's just like the Masons, the Illuminati, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, all the other ones. Jeez. And that's the thing about it. Everybody says, oh, it's the Jews. Oh, it's the Chinese. Oh, it's the Russians. Oh, it's the Italians. No. It's the cabal. It's the cabal. Understand what I mean when I'm talking about the cabal. A cabal has many parts to it, and it has varying degrees of membership, which means that you know, kind of like a need-to-know basis. That's what we have going on right now. What's important to know is what is the plan, and I've been talking in the previous episodes about it. I know it's long, you got to get through them. But I've been talking about the plan and where it's going, where these people are headed to. They're headed to Australia, New Zealand, and the tip of South America. They're not headed to northern Canada. They're not headed to northern Russia. They're not headed to northern Scandinavia. They're not headed to Alaska. They're all headed to the southern tip of South America, from Peru down, from Uruguay down, Paraguay down. They're into the southern half of Australia. They're in New Zealand. The real smart ones would be going to Tasmania. If you can buy a plane ticket, you could go there. Or you can be in the more risky areas, like where I am, but I have less competition. And I started earlier. That's why Alaska's not as viable. But if you can get to Canada, if you can get to like just north of the Canadian border, that whole strip in there, 20 degrees, 10, 20 degrees north, it'll still be bearable, but you'll be north of the belt, the death belt. They're going to get it. I mean, think about it. We had an opportunity to have peace with Iran. And people, oh, well, Trump trusted Hegseth and Trump trusted Bibi. There was no trusting. That's the bullshit that they're giving you. The decision was made to blow up Iran, to get the war going on so that frickin' Israel will hopefully send in a nuke. Once the nukes start flying, then they can get enough nukes in the air, whether it's Russia who does it or China who does it or we do it. And that could be something as simple as like just sending it straight up in the sky and having it come straight back down. Think about that. If they can do false flags, going all the way back, at least to Pearl Harbor, as I told you, that Admiral Lyons told me personally. And from, if you know demolitions, and I know demolitions very well, you know how buildings come down. And 9/11 was not the way they tell us. That was the propaganda to get us into another war to lose, not a war to defend the country or to protect the country, but in order to endanger the country further and wipe out more of our masculine alpha males and patriotic alpha males and impoverish us. That's what it's a wealth redistribution. Just in the same way they did it to the British Empire. They did the same thing to the British Empire. They did it to the Spanish Empire. They did it to the French Empire. They did it to the Dutch. Think about that. They move it and move it and move it. They move it and they move it. They're in control of this fake money, this fiat currency. It's fake. But people believe the hypnosis of it, not understanding that you can actually do business without it. Because what is really happening? Money is trust. That's also why the dollar's failing right now. It's because nobody can trust the U.S. When did that start? When did they start creating trust? They created trust with World War II. They created the war. They gave us the trust. They used the trust to get everybody to bring their wealth under the safety of the United States under Bretton Woods. Then, as Bretton Woods was falling apart, they were getting ready to move it. And so that's what's been happening. 47, 48, 45. What are the important things that happen? U.S. dollar's currency is the reserve currency. Israel is being created. These are all happening at the same time. This is the game that they've been playing. Again, read Pawns in the Game. That's a good start. And then you're thinking critically, and you read stuff by Bill Cooper, which is basically one big book to read. It's not a big book, but it's just a book that really is big because of what's in it, which is Behold the Pale Horse. It's the apocalypse. And that apocalypse is for you and me if you're not Jewish, or more importantly, not a good Jew. And how do you define a good Jew? Kind of like, how do you do that? It's selective. It's subjective. That's what's being played out right now. So on that note, you don't have to buy the land with fake money. You don't have to live in a specific place, except there are better places that I showed you. It'll just be harder in the places that you might be if you're in the belt. Does that mean you have to change your identity, your location? Whitney Webb was pretty smart about going down to Chile. As I've said, I'd be in Chile. I speak the language. I could disappear in a heartbeat. And I could disappear. I've done it before. I'll go into how you can disappear in later parts. There are ways you do it. Because remember, it's a shift. What do you look like? What do you do? What can you do? What's your knowledge base? What do you know that people don't know that you have as a database of knowledge that you can actually shift? If a guy is known as just being a financier, but they don't know that he knows how to work on boats, or he knows how to build boats, that's an asset. That's a strategic asset as compared to a hard asset. We talked about assets. Improve your asset base. Get more strategic assets. that connotates knowledge, technical knowledge, fabrication, repair. These are skills. This is a strategic asset that you can have. Hard assets, gold, silver, land. Certain kinds of currencies. What are going to be the currencies that can be traded? Except for the digital. The digital, that's just a flat out, total, you're thinking it's going to be easier on you so you can go and purchase things. But if suddenly they find out if there could be a glitch that pops up, they're like, oh, well, you're a bad citizen and you can't get access to your accounts. You're supposed to starve. That's how they can do it. In the same way that the 15-minute city, they put you in a 15-minute city, they have total control over you. They can cause you to just die from starvation. Remember, COVID was a test, and it was actually the experiment. And they brought back the research from that experiment. Will people stay in their buildings? Will they stay away from people? Which actually, interactivity with other people is actually very healthy. And with real people, right? With the world around you, going outside, getting vitamin D, natural vitamin D. That's why they've been doing the contrails back and forth. You know, this is the second year that they haven't been doing contrails, and we're having normal winters up here, which means we're going to have normal summers. We're going to have, I predict, like incredible growing seasons unless they bring the contrails back, and then they'll prevent us from growing well up here. That's by design. They've been collecting research. They've been doing this. Geoengineering. There's a guy who's got a channel all about geoengineering. You should look into it. It's just like, Operation Popeye. Operation Popeye was the atmospheric seeding that was being done in order to totally saturate the Ho Chi Minh Trail to prevent the North Vietnamese from coming down through Laos and Cambodia into Vietnam to supply the southern troops, the Viet Cong and the NVA that were in the south. And if you've heard the actual talk by Johnson, he says, those who control the weather control the world. Think about that. These people are about control. It's not about your representation in the Constitution. I pray to God we can take that back, because we're not going to vote it in. As I said before, if you think that Franklin and Washington and Jefferson could have voted us to be a democratic republic in the first place, that they would have done that. And actually, Benjamin Franklin was trying to get independence from the enslavement of the currency they were putting on America, because we had our own currency, and that's why we were doing so well, like every other country that isn't under the control of the City of London and the Bank of and the Bank of England. So when I use the words City of London, Bank of England, they're interchangeable. So focus on your needs. What are you missing? I mean, we've talked about it. Food, water, shelter, security, community. They all work together. You're not going to be able to do this alone. I have a community. I've built a community. I have a community internationally. We share information back and forth. So the ones who make it can actually, if we can contact after all this crap has finally hit the peak and we're dealing with the repercussions of their success. See, I'm past the idea. Other people are saying we gotta stop them. We're doing everything we can. But mainly I'm looking at not the point of stopping them, but lessening the effect. That's all I think you can do, is to lessen the effect. And you can do it within your own communities. And if you have more and more communities who are thinking like you, us, which is we're not going to let this evil cabal achieve what they've been doing. And especially using the media against us. In the same way, think about it. The war is going on, just like in Vietnam. And the cabal says it's time for America to start losing the war. So they get the Tet Offensive that I remember from my childhood. They get the Tet Offensive going, and then once that's happened, we now put in, because It's just to give the environment and surprise to the Americans who thought that basically Westmoreland had told everybody, oh, the war has been won and we have beat the enemy. And now we're just keeping the peace. And then to have the Tet Offensive. And then to have Walter Cronkite go over there. Which, remember, Operation Mockingbird, it never ended, by the way. It's just gone from traditional broadcast into social media. So that's why when I'm warning and cautioning you about how much salt you should put onto the information you get from Tucker Carlson's productions and Sean Ryan's productions and Joe Rogan's productions and Tom Bilyeu and there's another one. Oh yeah, Diary of a CEO. What is happening there? Is it something that actually helps you with your health? Well, Diary of a CEO, when they had the herbalist, great. But then you start bringing in people and you start to question what their backgrounds are and how they got there and who was paying them. It's the key of trying to understand who's paying them. I know who butters freaking Joe Rogan's. That's why I'll never be on Joe Rogan's. Even though a lot of people say, how come you've never been on Joe Rogan's? And this is way back when he was just getting started. It might have been okay back then, kind of like Sean Ryan would have been okay when he was just trying to get going. But remember what I told you. This cabal, they don't initiate things. They just see who's coming up. They create the environment. They see what starts to bubble up. And then they hijack it. And then they hijack it. And then they start leading it door to way. Whether it's financially direct or it's like, hey, we've got somebody who would like to get on your show. Or it's like, do you know about this guy? Do you know about that guy? You should get that. That'd be a good guy to have on your show. Would you like me to give you a contact? Like CIA would do. Like, oh yeah. Or someone that you trust at CIA. Oh, man. And by the way, if you were in CIA, doesn't necessarily you're still in CIA. People say that. If that was the case, the world will be totally different based on the people who have left CIA. But the way they do get you, if you still have to be a good boy, is they keep you out in your retirement. That's how they get you. Like any other government employee. That's the biggest guillotine sitting on top of everybody's head who works for the government. And it's going to get worse. See, now it's just like, oh, well, I don't want the government to disappear because I don't want my freaking retirement checks to stop. You know, because if they stop, I'll be in trouble. I want them to keep on coming. So that means we are vested in the government as it is, no matter how fucked up and totally owned it is, to keep on going. Even though it's a monster that was created by outside evil influences to create the big monster it is, contrary to the Constitution. The Constitution was created to keep it small and controllable. Now it's uncontrollable, and it will lead to either a blow up or a total, complete enslavement of the American people in a manner that it will be so much in your face that 1984 will seem like a cakewalk in contrast. Go read 1984 by George Orwell. He had a peek into it. His brother was part of the program. And Orwell was invited into it. But instead he wrote a fiction piece about what was happening. And nothing stopped. It hasn't stopped anything, has it? Because these people modify. What I find just wild is that these are ideas that were placed in the United States for sure. Before that, we're talking, you know, with Meyer, Bauer, and all the way back with the Rothschild. But I mean, in the United States, with the creation of just let's start with the Carnegie. I'll put another link so you can go and listen to Norman Dodd. I've read that document. I've read the other two documents of un-American activities that are very important to understand, to see where we're at. And this is the Senate committee. These are politicians who actually were protecting the country at the time through their investigations. And it fell on deaf ears. It never got out. And nobody paid attention to what was happening. Everybody was focused on the Red Scare. Because the whole idea is that they were going to ramp up the wars for the military-industrial complex so we could start blowing up people, and they could be blowing us up because we'd be making money loaning to the Soviets at the same time. Remember, you always win when you bet on both sides, and that's what the Rothschilds and the Illuminati do. Even the creation of the Soviet Union, a.k.a. they start with the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, the socialists, socialist communists. That was all bankrolled by the Rothschilds. Lenin was brought to the UK for his final send-off before being sent to St. Petersburg. And then everything got going. And funding and throwing money. But never using their own money. That's how they play. That's how they've been playing us, taking all the debt that we have been creating in this country and using it to fund, because that's what our currency is now. It's not actual wealth. You don't own anything. Look at what you own. Look at what you really own. Especially if you've been using credit cards. Especially if you've been using mortgages on your home to buy. Even if you're buying more property. So you're basically trying to run across water as quickly as possible to not sink. That's what you're doing. That's what the race is. That's the conditioning of what people have been conditioned to do. And how do people make a break from that? There's a lot of writing about that. But people don't want to put the time in. And that's been one of the big debates. Do people want to be slaves? And if we look at what happened with the slaves in the South, evidently, they say, oh, I don't want to be a slave. So why didn't they band together and just kill everybody and run to the north? This is after it was, you couldn't send slaves back. Coming up on beginning of the War of Secession. Because conditioning. The more you get conditioned, the more your alpha males are removed, the more you break up the family system. Starting to see how this has all been planned out. That's what I was talking about with like the women's movement. There was the original movement when it was being started in the 1800s where they were pushing back and changing. But then there was the Now movement, which is totally funded by the Rockefellers. And why was that? If you ever saw the interview with Aaron Russo, the reason is, as he got it from one of the Rothschilds, questionable about how he was actually a Rothschild, or whether he was a Rothschild, because that was the David Rothschild. The David, yeah. The reason it was done was to do two things. One is to remove both parents from the home, because they're both working now, independence. The woman now can make her own money, but also you have two taxpayers voluntarily or have to pay their federal income taxes because of the propaganda and not the questioning of like, is this actually constitutional? It's not. And by having both parents out, you now can get to the young, because it's harder to program those who have been through life experiences and are better read than it is for young kids. And where can you best get them? When you make them wards of the state, by sending them to the education system, to the public education system. That's why the wealthy elites don't send their kids to the public education system. They send them to the schools where they actually give them a proper education instead of a conditioning to be slaves, to be worker bees. As Rockefeller himself decided that he didn't want any thinkers, he wanted workers and consumers. And that's where the media comes in. Thoughts to ponder on. I'll put more links again in the bottom. You're going to be seeing something really interesting in the next month. It goes much further than just a nuclear war in the Middle East. Pay attention to when you're listening, watching shows. Who are the people that are being interviewed on Tucker's show? Who are the people who are being interviewed on Sean Ryan's show or on Sarah Adams? What is Sarah Adams trying to do? Ramp up your fears so that you'll be ready to go. You're like vested because it's the Iranians who are doing all this. It's the Iranians who are sending these drones over. Wow. Okay. Buzzing these bases. And they can't be shot down because they're just so special. And then we also have people who are still on the FBI list in Iran, like that Air Force intelligence officer who has helped them for the last, 10, 20 years since she went, that was it, 2016 she went over? She went over the fence. These are games being played on the people. That's the only way you can keep us just like the slaves in the South. Oh, massa. We don't want to get it uppity. No. They could get us all. All three of them. Remember what happened in the Soviet Union. And if Alexander Solzhenitsyn said that we were becoming the Soviet Union, well, then it's inevitable we will end up like the Soviet Union. And I think it's going to be pretty soon. And I think it's actually by plan. Because the question is, remember how it went in the Soviet Union after? When the Soviet Union collapsed, it was a free-for-all. And there wasn't anything about helping. And then those who were there were trying to grab whatever they could. And that would be the same thing happening in the West. And Europe, I have no idea how that's going to end up, except all the invaders are going to start killing the natives and do what they can to get whatever they can, because they're not going to be making anything. They're not going to be growing anything. They're not going to be producing anything. Shoot, the last production in Germany was when BASF went to China. That was the death knell of Europe. And now you're just seeing, just like the elephant's been shot, and it's still like fighting a few, but it's really just toppling over. That's what Europe is right now. Preparation. You either live on land that you've got, or you've got an opportunity to move to a place. I would not be in the desert areas of this country. I would not go to the desert countries of other countries. There will be shifts. So if we have nuclear winter going around the equator, following along around the equator, and in a belt around, where would be the best place to be? Think about it. On that note, God bless. Stay positive. You might think, oh, how can you stay positive with all this doom and gloom happening around and all this keeping you off balance? I know the facts as I'm seeing them. I look at them. They're very depressing, but it doesn't get me down. It doesn't get me down because I'm doing whatever I can with the tools that I have, with the resources that I've got, and the resources that I'm continuing to add, as I hope you are too. If you're doing that, you're fine. You're as fine as you can be. God bless. Watch your six.